Tekiah. Let's sing that again. Ma tovu, ma tovu. Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu, ma tovu.
Welcome, everybody. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.
It is so good to see you. So a word about Rosh HaShanah. We are here to connect to something bigger than ourselves, to our history, to our vision, to the Torah, to our ancestors, to God, to our souls. We're here to connect. And I will tell you, one of the hardest things about doing that in these times are the Mass. Right? It's hard to connect with the Mass, in part because it's hard to see each other's expressions. So will you do me a favor? Will you just give us a little wave so we can connect without the thank you? Thank you. Okay. So the way that things have been working thus far this Rosh Hashanah is we've had about this many number of people in each of our services, and we extended our services. And then for every 100 or so folks that we have in person, there's about 200 families online at the same time. So it's a much bigger community than we might see at any particular moment. It's important to be aware of that. This is not any indication of anything other than there's Corona, and we're dealing with it the best that we can. So a few announcements to get started. Of course, your mask should be worn over nose and mouth the whole time, just for everybody's safety. If you need an exit quickly, take a look at the exit signs around you. Okay, locate an exit sign around you. And mask over nose and mouth the whole time, please. Over nose and mouth the whole time. Thank you. Cell phones. Turn them off, silence them, your Apple Watches. That way we're not getting calls in the middle of the service. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This year, Operation Isaiah is in full effect, collecting food and coats. Your donations and clothing will help to clothe and feed our neighbors at the CAC and JF&CS. So our thanks to Beth Sherman and our Social Justice Committee for making this happen. Second day Rosh Hashanah services will take place tomorrow, 10 a.m. here. If it's nice, we'll do it outside. If it's raining, we'll be in the sanctuary. Saturday, 4:30 is Tashlich. Tashlich is at Azalea Park. Come and cast your sins into the Chattahoochee. Sunday, 9 a.m., we have our memorial cemetery service at the Temple Emanu-El section of Arlington Cemetery. So, for those joining us today online, welcome. Your Machzor is going to be pinned to your Facebook page. For those who are here in the sanctuary, this is what we're using right here, your gold Machzor, and if you need one, you can just grab one right from outside. Want to express our gratitude to our co-presidents and our board of directors and the many, many volunteers who make Temple Emanu-El the amazing place that it is. Your efforts allow the sacred light of this place to shine through. Temple Emanu-El is member-supported, future-driven. The faith and active engagement of our membership allows Temple Emanu-El to be a blessing for good in the world and into the lives of every single person here today. With me on the bima is cantor Lauren Adesnik. On the piano is our very own Ann Rollins. Stephen Blick and his crew continue to work without end to make sure that we have everything that we need as a congregation. And I got to tell you, he is the hardest working man in show business. He really is. I'm Rabbi Spike Anderson. It's wonderful to be here together. If you're online, give us a shout out. If you're here, turn to the people around you, beside you, across from you. Make eye contact. Hi, Shana Tova. Happy New Year. Good to see you. For everyone, whether you're with us here in the sanctuary or joining us from your home, clearly this Rosh HaShanah is not exactly how we envisioned it would be. Nevertheless, Hineni, here we are, ready to enter our new year with honesty and truth and hope. So let's take a nice deep breath together. We let it out. Are you ready? Are you ready? Okay, let's begin. We rise for Baruch, page 142. Remain standing, page 144, in the middle. Please join me as we pray together. In love, you bring light to the earth and its creatures. Your goodness renews the creation each day. Infinite, varied, and rich are your works, divine artist, all of them wrought with wisdom. The whole earth is teeming with life. Awestruck by the universe, work of your hands, let all life bless you, praise you, and celebrate the beauty of your lights. We take a deep breath, get ready for the Shema on page 150. Be seated. The Hafta on page 152, leading us is our very own Jake Summerfield. Et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'kol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadevarim ha'ele Asher Anochi Mitzavecha Hayom Al Levavecha Vishinantam Levanecha v'dibarta b'am, v'shivtecha levetecha, u'lechtecha v'derech, u'shachbecha u'v'kumecha.
U'shertameyot decha, v'hayut utafot ben enecha.
U'v'tavtam al mezuzot beitecha, u'visharecha, leman tizkeru, v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'tem kedoshim le'Elohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, liot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
Elohim emet.
Page 160. Join with me together. True and steadfast is this teaching, beloved and treasured, a source of wonder, a fount of goodness, a thing of beauty, and ours for all time, together. And true it is, the eternal God is our sovereign, the rock of Jacob, our protecting shield. Through all generations, God's name lives on. God's throne stands firm. God's dominion prevails. God's grandeur and faithfulness endure through eternity. God's words are precious. They will live forever. 164.
Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nezar b'kodesh, lo razilot u'sefer.
We rise for our Amidah on page 168, knowing that we don't enter this conversation alone. We enter it together and with yichus, a connection, a rich, long history with the divine.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor, v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, v'Koneh HaKol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, u'mevii Geula livnei bneihem, leman Shemo be'ahava. Zochrenu l'chaim, melech hafetz l'chaim, v'kotvenu b'sefer ha'chaim, lemancha Elohim chaim, melech ozer mushya u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo.
Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah.
Amen.
Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, mechayeh hakol ata rav lehoshia, mechakel chaim b'chesed, mechayeh hakol b'rachamim rabim, samech noflim, rofeh cholim, u'matir asurim, u'mekayem emunato l'shelei afar, micha גבורות ומידו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ולאמונתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני
ברכו בו שמו.
מחיי הכל.
Amen. Please be seated, page 173. We're getting ready to enter the Untitled Chapter prayer. Untitled Chapter is a serious one, and I have picked this intention on the top of 173 because it came from Rabbi Dr. Aaron Pankin, who is one of my mentors, was the provost at Hebrew Union College, and he died in a plane crash about 5 years ago. He had a private plane that he used to fly around. And this book of Mishkan Tefillah and this quote from his was picked about 2 years before that. So to me it is apropos that we lift his words for a prayer which absolutely describes the meaning of Untitled Chapter, which is we just don't know. And so in the meantime, we need to live our life the best that we can. Dr. Pankin says our actions help us live in such a way that when we suffer life's darkest depredations, we will always have ways of coping with them. Our actions may not change the ultimate outcome one iota, but they alter our attitude, bolster our ability to withstand challenges, help us handle unavoidable misfortunes better, and see life's value amid chaos and dismay. Page 174.
ונתנת תוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא לא רע להיום, ובוא תנשא מלכותך, וייכון בחסד כיסאך, ותשב עליו באמת.
176. And so a great shofar will cry, Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, Behold, the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you, like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds. You decide destiny. You inscribe judgments. Page 178.
בראש השנה יכתבון ביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור יכתבון בראש השנה יכתבון ביום צום כיפור וביום צום כיפור יכתבון.
together. On Rosh HaShanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who will be tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who will be exalted? But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree.
U'teshuva, u'tefillah, u'tzedakah, ma'avirin et Torah ha'gezerah.
185. The Eternal shall reign for all time, your God for all generations. Zion, hallelujah. We will teach your greatness, Lador Vador, from generation to generation, and to the end of time we will affirm your holiness. O God, your praise shall ever be on our lips, for your power is boundless, sovereign, and holy.
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador, Nagid Gor Lacha. Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador, Nagid Gor Lacha. U'lenetzach netzachim, Gerushatecha nakdish, Gerushatecha nakdish. V'shivchacha Eloheinu, v'kinu Lo yamur le'olam va'ed. Here comes your part. Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador, Nagid Gor Lacha. Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador,
Lador Vador, Nagid Gor Lacha. Yehi melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh ata. Ki melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh ata.
Page 191, Psalm 15. God, who is able to live for you and enjoy your holy presence? She who lives uprightly, works for justice, and speaks the truth. She who does not revile others or do evil to a friend or harass her neighbor. She who keeps company with others who love and revere God, but avoids intimacy with those who ignore or forsake God. She who keeps her promises and lives with integrity. She who lends money generously without expecting interest and will not condemn the innocent. She who lives this way will never be shaken.
Baruch atah Adonai,
Baruch Baruch Shemo.
HaMelech HaKadosh.
Amen. So it goes without saying that this past year has been a really tough one for everyone. COVID-19 has taken its toll on our health, our school and work, and on our safety in ways that we could not have imagined. We had hoped that the vaccine would be the solution, but as we know, the human condition is still rife with inexplicable behavior. Like you, most days I feel frustrated. Some days I get scared. And once in a while, I experience a draining sense of fatigue. I have my moments, I do. Even my optimistic nature feels battered and torn. This surprises me. I'm not used to feeling down. Fortunately, my wife and kids are usually enough to raise my spirits again. And of course, our synagogue community, with all the tremendous good that comes from it, nourishes me. Like Rosh HaShanah day, it renews me, and I need it. I look back on this past summer with a sense of longing when the COVID numbers were high, COVID numbers were low, and a cautious optimism was in the air. While our kids were at camp, Marita and I decided that we wanted to reclaim some of what we had lost this past year. We wanted to see our friends. One night we had dinner with David and Amanda Lower. He's the senior pastor at St. Luke's Presbyterian Church in Dunwoody. She teaches children at the Mount Vernon School. Most of the time when we get together, we laugh and talk about our kids and tell stories. But on this night, the conversation got serious, and it really affected me. We talked about justice, how some people have it, while many others don't. For every 2 steps forward, we seem to take a step back. Hate and racial tension have been weaponized, and attempts for progress are challenged in every way imaginable. We talked about COVID, of course, but mostly how horrified we were that public health has been politicized to the point of self-destruction. We were doubtful, extremely doubtful, if anyone at all had the political will to set our nation straight or the power to actually do so. Our bitterly divided America has become a cliche, locked in a cold civil war, which threatens to boil over. And we talked about the environment. This was, for me, the most painful part of the conversation. Man-made conditions have finally erupted into record temperatures all over the world, with never-before-seen floods, a frequency of hurricane, and melting polar ice caps. Nations of the earth are slow to react, when they bother to react at all. And the vast majority of humankind shrug their collective shoulders, feeling helpless, even as the clock continues to tick. What kind of world are we handing to our children? My clergy friend asked me from across the table. What kind of life will they have? We began to search for solutions, grasping at every possible straw we could rationally think of. But each one was deemed highly unlikely or even impossible against the intricate wall of intractable division. How could a people, a nation, a world who couldn't agree on the most basic self-evident facts hope to agree on any widespread, meaningful solution? It would take a catastrophe, we decided, and nobody in their right mind would ever want that. Finally, out of reasonable options, we defaulted to, well, someone will step up. Someone with clarity enough to cut through all the confusion and charisma enough to unite our country and the entire world. Sounds like I shared with the pastor, knowing it was a loaded suggestion, what we need is a Messiah. And he agreed. Only if. Someone to appear like Superman in the distance and rush forward in the nick of time to save the proverbial day. What is the Jewish view of the Messiah? He asked me. I thought about it for a moment. It's complicated, I answered him, and it is. There's a lot of history and upheaval in the answer. But basically, I told him, in the progressive Jewish world, it can be summed up as there is no Messiah and you're it. There is no Messiah and you're it. Now, this line is not my own, although I wish it were. It's the title of Rabbi Robert Levine's book, written in the wake of September 11th, when our nation was at the lowest low we'd felt in generations. In it, he traces the history of Jewish messianic thought and its evolution into our present-day Jewish consciousness. Now, let's clear the air for a moment. When I say the word Messiah, what do you think of? What do you feel? We Jews tend to have a visceral reaction to the word Messiah. I've been teaching a monthly Finding God class since I came to Temple Emanu-El. And when I asked them this question, their answers were very telling. First of all, even me asking them this question made them uncomfortable. The term Messiah evokes collective Jewish memories of forced conversions and anti-Semitism, of being accused and maligned. For many of us, Messiah is a Christian belief, and to an extent, at least in this day and age, that's mostly true. But it wasn't always so. The other answer that my Finding God class shared was that for modern rational thinkers, Messiah was dangerous, wishful thinking, that someone was going to come in and solve all of our problems for us. However, we all agreed that the idea of Messiah, against the backdrop of a society feeling prolonged despair, was an audacious act of hope, one that we admired even if we didn't share it. For what was the alternative? To accept that our situation is and always will be hopeless? That things could never get better? That we would inevitably continue our spiral of unyielding patterns of human self-destruction? Messiah, as we say in English, comes from the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means anointed one. Originally, Mashiach referred to high priests, emperors, and kings. They were all human beings with nothing supernatural about them. But with time, the term Mashiach began to take on a much more loaded context, one that reflected religious obsession with eschatology, the term for conditions that will lead to the end of the world. Understand that for Jews, throughout our long history, exile and war, return, and security have become the norm. Each time that we rebuilt our communities, we hoped that this time things would be different. But eventually, chaos and destruction would follow. This pattern was not unique to the Jews. Most civilizations that rise also will fall. But our response to the pattern became ingrained in our collective Jewish psyche. Rather than view the world nihilistically, viewing everything as meaningless, or that we were being punished by a vengeful God, a messianic theology developed that all of the war and upheaval that we are experiencing were actually the birth pangs of the Messiah, who would lead us not only back to the safety of our land, but would change the nature of reality itself. Yes, the wars and profound uncertainty were happening. No one could deny that. But they were happening for a reason, for a purpose, which meant that even if we didn't like God's plan, at least there was a plan. And we were, in our own passive way, somehow part of it. We see this reflected in the high hology imagery of the Sefer Chaim, the Book of Life, where our fate and God's will is recorded. The Rosh Hashanah Yichatevun, Uv'Yom Son Kippur Yichatemun. On Rosh Hashanah this is written, on the fast of Yom Kippur it's sealed, who will live and who will die, who by fire and who by water, who by war and who by beast. I hesitate to reduce 3,000 years of Jewish history into a pattern, but each age of Jewish immigration and accomplishment was cut short by major historical upheavals. The spread of Islam and the Crusades, expulsions, and finally, at the end of the Jewish Renaissance in Spain, came the Spanish Inquisition. Each time tragedy befell us, Jewish fervor increased for the Mashiach. When the Jews who fled the Spanish Inquisition found refuge in the Ottoman Empire, a small group of Jewish mystics moved into the mountain city of Sfat. There, with creative courage, they challenged this assumption of a calculating, punishing God in a profound way. Maybe we have it all wrong, they said. Maybe there's not an all-powerful God who's doing this to us. Maybe God is, like us, broken and scattered. Maybe God is, like us, battling forces of chaos and evil in the world. Maybe God is, like us, trying to heal and become whole. They saw the world as broken because God is broken. But rather than despair, these Kabbalists put forth a worldview of Jewish empowerment unlike anything ever seen before. It leaned on Torah stories, the glue of the Jewish civilization, that put each of us as individuals and we as a Jewish people in partnership with God to tikkun olam, to heal the world, one intentional act at a time. We call these intentional acts, as they're prescribed in our tradition, mitzvot. In this way, the Jews of Sfat posited, just as we need God, God needs us. We're partners in this endeavor. Without us, God would remain limited. Without us, the world would remain broken. This theological reframing reclaimed the sacred Brit or covenant with God, but with an orientation that empowered each of us and required each of us to actively and intentionally do our part. Then, and only then would both God and the world become healed and whole. And who would benefit from this redemption? The Jews, of course, but not only the Jews. Everyone. All people. The entire world. Theirs became, for the first time, a universal messianism. The Kabbalists of Sfat were way less focused on any one individual Messiah, but rather they strove for a messianic age. We Jews, each of us, were the absolute key to creating a just reality conducive for all people to be safe, healthy, and secure. Lo yisagoy el goy charev, velo yimoldun od milchama. Nations shall beat their swords into plowshares, and nations shall know war no more. A time where everyone would be able to sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. Lo b'shamayim hi. It's not something that's beyond us, they claimed, but rather it's well within our grasp to fully realize our potential as a vital partner with God to fix our broken world. Jewish messianic thought has evolved from a Messiah who would deliver us back to our land to one who would change the reality of the world, to a messianic age where we will each be part of bringing about the conditions that we dream the world could be. However, all of the messianic ideas that we Jews have held have one thing in common: a longing, a yearning, a desperate yearning. The world is broken, yes. And the Jew, at her core, at his core, yearns to fix it, to nourish it, to heal it. Yes, the world is a mess. And it's perfectly human to throw up our hands and have doubts about being able to change anything. But the yearning, the longing, the striving to make things better is the core of Judaism and the texture of what it means to be a Jew. Proverbs tells us that when there is no vision, the people perish. Perhaps the idea of a messianic age is less accurate to say than we're on a messianic journey with no guarantees of success. Our Jewish vision has evolved into directing the very best of who we are towards justice and peace and love. Then will everyone be able to sit beneath their vine and fig tree in peace and unafraid. This is what it could be. This is the vision. But we have to do the work. Modern Reform Judaism has taken this to its logical conclusion. There is no Messiah, we say. At least no one's going to come, no one person who's going to come and do all the work for us. And you're it. You are the one. And so is the person sitting next to you and the person sitting next to them. The one. But we can't wait. You are needed. Far from helpless, Judaism assures us you have the power to love more deeply, to be more compassionate, and to better engage the world around us. That's our charge. That's what we've been telling ourselves for hundreds of generations. That's our mission. Now, I know that ours is a demanding tradition. It can feel overwhelming that Judaism asks so much of us. This is what we mean on Rosh HaShanah when we talk about tshuva. It's an acknowledgement that we can become more than we currently are, and better than we have been. And this has huge implications on each of us and for the world in which we live. That life is more than about just roaming the earth. The years that we have, in the end, come down to meaning. What kind of husband or wife could I be? Sister or brother? Child or grandparent? Citizen of the world? Jew? Congregant at Temple Emanu-El? These questions help us reorient ourselves, return to our vision of how we can do the sacred work of protecting each other and healing our surroundings. As long as we keep our Jewish vision before us and engage in our relationships that allow us to do the work, then we each can see ourselves as being part of the same messianic journey, one that our people have been on since time as we know it began. There is no Messiah, and you are it. Shana Tova. Please rise for the great Elenu, page 202.
Shabeach Ladon Hakol Lated Gedula Leotzer Bereshit Shelo Asadu Kegoye Haratzot Velo משפחות האדמה שלא שם חלקנו כהם וגורלנו ככל המונם ואנחנו קוראים שחבים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 205. Ribono Shel Olam, power of all, have compassion on the souls of Israel. Open their hearts to do teshuvah before you. Open their souls for the sake of returning to you. Dwell on each sound of the shofar. Contemplate its meaning. Tekiah, 1 whole note. Shvarim Teruah, 3 broken notes, 9 staccato notes. Tekiah, 1 whole note.
My return to the right path has the power to make me whole again. Tekiah, once I was whole. Shvarim Teruah, in the wear and tear of living, I became broken and shattered. Tekiah, my tshuva has the power to make me whole again. Page 206 for the Shofar Blessings.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmo al kol shofar. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazmon hazeh. Amen.
Please echo the cantor's calls.
Tekiah.
Tekiah.
Shvarim Teruah.
Shvarim Teruah.
Tekiah.
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 Shvarim.
Shvarim.
Tekiah.
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 Teruah.
Teruah.
Tekiah.
Tekiah.
Areshet Sefatenu, Yerav Lefanecha, Aaron Benisan. Areshet Sefatenu, Yerav Lefanecha, Aaron Benisan. Vivinu mazin mabit, umakshib v'kol tikiyatenu. V'travel v'rachamim, v'rachamin v'ratzon, seder malchuyotenu.
Please continue standing for Avinu Malkeinu, page 223. Come on up. Over the other side. Avinu Malkeinu, Shema Kolenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, together, almighty and merciful, hear our voice.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chatanu Lefanecha.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have strayed and sinned before you.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chamol Aleinu, Va'al Olaleinu Vitapenu.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion on us and our families.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kolet Dever V'cherev V'ra'av Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the onslaught of sickness, violence, and hunger.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kolet Kotsar Umastin Me'aleinu.
Avinu Malkeinu, halt the reign of those who cause pain and terror.
Avinu Malkeinu, Kotvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim.
Avinu Malkeinu, enter our names in the book of lives well lived.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chadesh Aleinu, Shana Tova.
Avinu Malkeinu, renew for us a year of goodness.
Avinu Malkeinu, almighty and merciful, answer us with grace, for our deeds are wanting. Save us through acts of justice and love.
Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu V'Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu V'Aleinu, Ki Emanu-El. Aseh Emanu, Tzedaka v'Chesed. Aseh Emanu, Tzedaka v'Chesed, V'Hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu V'Aleinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu V'Aleinu, Ki Emanu-El.
Please be seated. Good job, guys.
Good afternoon. I am Robert Wittenstein. I am co-president of Temple Emanu-El, and this is the last time that I will be addressing you as president or co-president. And I'm delighted that that did not yield any applause. I want to start with a couple of thank yous. The first is to my wife, Susan. Over the last 2.5 years, she has allowed our family's life to revolve around the synagogue's life, and that has required a great deal of flexibility and understanding, for which I am very grateful. I also want to thank our members. Belonging to a synagogue is a really substantial commitment. Without you all, we could not do the important work that we do, and we don't thank you often enough. And so today, let me say thank you. I'm also keenly aware that I am standing on the shoulders of giants. The lay leaders who preceded me in this congregation have done just a remarkable job of creating a Temple Emanu-El that is ready for a very strong future. I really want to thank our clergy and our staff. This has been a really tough year for them. I especially want to thank, as Rabbi Spike did, our executive director, Stephen Blick, who is one of the hardest working people I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I also want to thank my co-president, Edie Disner, and the Board of Trustees. We really do have a group of lay leaders with both passion and energy, and they are a pleasure to work with. I struggle to find the right adjective to describe this past year. On the one hand, we have suffered the worst pandemic in our lifetimes. And we as a congregation did not escape sickness and death. On the other hand, we were much more lightly impacted than many, many other communities. And for that, I'm really very grateful. On the one hand, we have had synagogue families who've been financially impacted this past year. Our membership continues to grow, which is very gratifying. But despite that, this last year, our dues revenue was down 13%. And that was because for the first time, we had a number of families requesting dues relief who had not needed it in the past. On the other hand, we had 46 families this year who volunteered for our enhanced dues and paid more than what they owed in order to make up that difference. And that's the largest number of families who've participated in that program, and that's the largest amount of money that we've ever gotten through that program. During the previous year, the building has been closed, and it has been very difficult for us to make connections. But on the other hand, while it's been closed, we have had this wonderful renovation of our Brill Family Social Hall. We've renovated our kitchen. And thanks to the generosity of a dozen families, we now have a brand new Shofar Family Terrace Chapel and the Goldstein patio below it. And these are remarkable improvements to our fiscal plant. Thanks to some very generous donations and to the federal PPP program, Temple Emanu-El is in pretty sound shape right now. And that gives us an opportunity that we have not had before, and that is to focus attention on our endowment fund. Imagine all of the things we could do if we had the money. There are programs, there are services, there's innovations that we could do, and one of the ways to help us achieve that is by setting aside money in perpetuity to provide interest and dividends that would provide a reliable source of income for the synagogue. Today, we rely entirely on dues and fundraising events throughout the year to fund our operations. And for the most part, that's sufficient. But it varies from year to year, and some years we have gaps. Wouldn't it be great if there were a fund that was available to provide an additional source of funds when we need them? This is an initiative we're going to kick off now and that we're going to carry forward through this year, and so I ask you to stay tuned for more information on the endowment fund. The other thing that we're going to focus on this year is the Havarah program. At its heart, Temple Emanu-El is a sacred community. Everyone needs to feel connected, not just to our clergy, but to each other as well. For those of you who may not be familiar, a Havarah is a group of 10 or so families with similar interests who meet regularly to share experiences and to create community. So here's my call to action for the year. If you're in a Havarah, work to make it stronger. If you're not in a Havarah, or you're in a Havarah that's become inactive, take the initiative to join one this year so you can begin to start creating a meaningful community relationships with your fellow members. It has been a rare privilege for me over the last 2.5 years to help lead Temple Emanu-El, and I am deeply grateful for that opportunity. HaShanah Tova.
HaShanah Tova. Thank you, Robert. Friends, we rise for our Torah service, page 228.
Adonai, Adonai, Erachum v'chanun, Erech hapayim, Rav chesed v'emet, Lo tzechesed la'alafim, Lo sehavon v'fesha, v'chata v'nakeh. Adonai, Adonai, God, compassionate, gracious, endlessly patient, loving, and true, showing mercy to the 1,000th generation, forgiving evil, defiance, and wrongdoing, granting pardon. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adoninu, Kadosh v'Nora Shemo, Gadol Adonai איתי, ונרוממה שמו יחדיו. לך אדוני הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד, כי הוא בשמיים ובארץ, כי הוא בשמיים ובארץ. לך אדוני המלאכה והמתנשא לכל ראש. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני everyone umurmu. And I say ki, you say ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai.
Our traditional Torah reading for Rosh HaShanah is Genesis 22, also known as the binding of Isaac. In response to God's command, Abraham is poised to literally sacrifice his son Isaac in a fanatical display of loyalty. Satisfied that Abraham was willing to do this deed, God stops Abraham from taking his son's life by sending an angel to stay the descending knife. For now I know, says the angel, that you fear God, since you've not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. Now, I've always found this story to be incredibly disturbing. You? Yeah. You should know that our sages were disturbed by it as well. And so in every generation, our people have argued about what the Akedah means and what we're supposed to learn from it. Some of our sages argue that God's ultimate actions were meant to warn the Jews that God does not want human sacrifice, despite what other nations might do in the name of religion. That we Jews, above all else, value life and living. Fine, you say. Choose life, I get it, but it's still a super disturbing story. Why do we need to read it every single Rosh Hashanah? The answer to this excellent question we glean from Rosh Hashanah's other name, which is Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering. We read the binding of Isaac each year because we are a forgetful people. And we live in a world of competing values. Most of the time, we can be proud of how we conduct ourselves, but we may look at the world around us and be tempted to fall down to the lowest common denominator. We don't succumb to this temptation because we keep on reminding ourselves and each other that we are Am Segula, God's special people, picked to be partners with God to help right the world's wrongs. And so now, without further ado, as we've done for hundreds of generations, we will wrestle with the Akedah. Our Torah service continues on page 230 with the Torah blessings. The Binding of Isaac can be found on page 240. Our cantor will call up the honors.
For the honor of chanting our Aliyah and our Torah this morning, I am very pleased to call the Friedman family up to our Amud. Ya'amdu Gilasara Shlomo La'aliyah LaTorah. Alexa and Julia will chant verses 4 through 8 for us, if you are following along. And their parents, Steve and Lisa, will offer our blessings.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Va'ed.
V'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayom hashlishi, vayisa Avraham et zeinav, vayar et hamakom merachok, vayomer Avraham el na'arav. Shvu lahem po im hachamor, ve'ani ve'hana'ar, nileha ad ko, ve'nishtahave ve'nashuva alehem. Vayikach Avraham et atzei ha'olah, vayasem el Yitzhak beno.
Vayikach be'ado et ha'esh ve'et ha'ma'achelet ve'achlu shnehem yachdav. Vayomer Yitzhak al Avraham aviv, vayomer avi, vayomer hineni beni, vayomer hine ha'esh ha'itzim, vahiyah ha'asa le'olah, vayomer Avraham Elohim. Yirei lo hasa le'olah beni, ve'achlu shnehem yachdav.
Yasher koach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'hayei olam nata b'torkenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Beautiful. You can leave it right there. Thank you, Friedman family. So, friends, if you turn to page 245, you'll see our Misha Berach prayer. Misha Berach is our prayer that we say when we are in need of a healing, or someone in our life is in need of a healing. Healing of mind, body, soul, relationship. We ask for a refuah shlema, a complete and speedy recovery towards healing and wholeness. Friends, as is the minhag hamakom here, the tradition of this place, I'd ask everyone to rise. And if you're comfortable putting your arms around the person next to you, please do so. If you have no one to put your arms around, feel my arms around yours. We're in this together. Misha Berach, page 245. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Refuah shlema. Please remain standing, page 246, for the lifting and rolling of the Torah.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה. יאללה לי 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 יאללה לי 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 יאללה לי 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 one more time. Yalla la 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 la, yalla la la la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la, yalla la 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 la.
Please be seated. In our Haftarah reading today, we see a woman named Hannah who, more than anything, wanted to be pregnant. She and her husband Elkanah have been trying for years with no success. And our Haftarah reading conveys the deep pain that this caused them. And so Hannah prays to God for a child. But she doesn't just pray, she prays with such honesty and desperation and truth that our rabbis chose this story to be our Haftarah reading on Rosh HaShanah. In other words, they say Hannah's prayer to God becomes our model of what our most heartfelt reaching out to God could be as we all travel this deep journey into self and these days of awe. Our prayer before Haftarah can be found on page 247. Hannah's story can be found on page 251. Our cantor will call up the honors.
This is a special Haftarah for me, especially, and I don't often get to chant it, and I am very humbled to offer it today. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza v'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah ובמשה עבדו, ובישראל עמו, ובנביאי האמת והצדק. ויאמר אליה אלי, עד מתי תשתכרין, הסירי עינך מעלייך. ותען חנה ותאמר לו אדוני, אישה קשת רוח אנוכי, ויין ושיכר לא שתיתי, ואשפוך את נפשי לפני אדוני. אל תיתן את אמתך לפני בת בליעל, כי מרוב שיחי וחסי דיברתי עד הנה. ויענה לי ויאמר לכי לשלום, ואלוהי ישראל ייתן את שאלתך אשר שאלת מאמו ותאמר תמצא שפחתך חן בעיניך ותלך האישה לדרכה ותוקע ופניה לא היו לך עוד.
259.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם צור כל העולמים צדיק בכל הדורות האל הנאמן האומר ועושה המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו אמת וצדק על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הזיכרון הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ודברך אמת וקיים לעד ברוך אתה אדוני
Baruch Shemo.
מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל ויום הזיכרון.
Amen. Page 277 to return the Torah to the ark. Please rise.
עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם לכל תבולתיה שלום השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו חדש ימינו כקדם.
Page 286, Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Please be seated. As we get ready for our mourner's Kaddish, look at page 291. There are stars up above, so far away, we only see their light long, long after the star itself is gone. So it is with people who we loved. Their memories keep shining ever brightly, though their time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. If you are in the Shloshim period of mourning, the first 30 days after a loved one's passing, I'd invite you to rise now so we can recognize you, both here in the sanctuary and at home. If you're in the first year of mourning a loved one's passing, I invite you to rise now and be recognized. Please remain standing. If you are commemorating the yahrzeit, the death anniversary of a loved one's passing, at this time of year, I'd ask you to rise now so we can recognize you. Please remain standing. If it is your custom to rise either in solidarity or for those who have no one to say Kaddish for them, I invite you to do so now. Mourner's Kaddish can be found on page 292. Yit Gadal v'yit Kadash me Rabbah be'alma divrach hirotei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael b'gala v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yit pa'ar v'yit roman v'yit naseh Vita dar, vita le, vita la, shmei de kucha, brichu, le'ela, min kol berchata v'shirata, tush berchata v'nechamata, damiram bi'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'imru mav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Remain standing for our final Shofar Blast. We're going to invite Chick on up. Cantor's going to call out the big shofar call. We're going to repeat it back with all the oomph that we can give it, and we're going to hear it sound.
Tekiah Gedolah.
Tekiah Gedolah. Woo! May you be inscribed and sealed in the book of life for a good year, a year of health, a year of blessings, a year of joy for you and your family and everyone here at Temple Emanu-El. Shana Tova, everybody.
Lishana Tova Tikatevu, Lishana